Good evening, everybody. We are here for our fourth Finance Committee meeting here on March 26th. Tonight, we are going to review 5 budgets and our revenue side of the budget. So just as a reminder, our first meeting on February 5th, we covered 9 budgets, which ended up being about 3.5% of our overall budget. We then met on February 25th, where we covered another 6 budgets, which represented about 1.25%. Then we again met on March 12th, and that was about 21% of our budget. Tonight, we're going to review 5 budgets, which represents nearly 75% of our budget. So we are first going to start off with pupil transportation, and I would like to invite Mr. Powers up to the chair so he can review his budget with our Finance Committee. Mr. Powers, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Monahan. Good evening, everybody. All right, so reviewing the budget for the upcoming year, we did some deep diving into seeing where we can save some money and be frugal for our department. Line number 1 is equipment replacement. You'll see that there's a zero balance there now. We took $50,000 out. That was because we had our snow blower purchase last year, which I've got video of at some point if you ever want to see it. It is amazing, and it reduces workforce hours, and it takes care of the snow very quickly. Moving on to line number 2. We did some research on our buses, where, one of the things that we were able to do this coming year is we had the old budget from 2 years ago to this budget, where all these buses all came in at the same time, where we're normally like a year behind. So that really helped our fleet. And moving into next year, we're going to, reduce our request to 5 72 passengers, 4 30 passengers, and we would like to replace one of our Suburbans because it is getting up there, and DOT is saying you need one, for the upcoming year. One of the things that we're doing this year for the Suburban is we're going to be attaching some emergency strobes. So God forbid we need traffic control, if we have to go to a scene, we can provide a safe area for our students and for the community. So with that reduction in equipment costs, we're down $464,159. We're keeping everything the same until we get to line number 24. This is our fuel cost. Based on our previous budgets and our expenditures, and looking at the history, and with the buffers that I've always put into place since I've been here, actually, if we reduce it by $23,466, we feel very comfortable because with our newer buses that we have, they're better on fuel, and it's not burning as, like the older ones would. But with the volatile market that's out there right now, especially, we did put that into consideration. But again, if you look at our past expenditures, we built that buffer, to help us out in the long run to be able to combat that, that little volatile market.
If I just make a comment.
Sure.
This was put together before the war in Iran started, so if you look at those prices.
It's a military operation.
Yeah, whatever it may be. So, but looking at it, we still feel pretty confident based on the historical expenditures that it's going to be adequate.
Moving forward down to line number 38. You'll see a reduction of $16,000. This was for the one-time payment of the upgrade for our route program. We're currently at 75% of the migration. We've got a 3-day class coming up for myself and my staff to get up to speed on the new program. This is that program I talked about last year where it will expedite the building of the routes. If a new student comes in, all I got to do is just tap where the address is, and the program actually does the route for us, whereas before it was all manual work. If a bus is late or leaving the school late, All we got to do is click on one button for that particular route, an automatic notification to all the parents. Bus is running 20 minutes late for whatever reason. That's some of the benefits of this program. So that was where we took $16,000 because that was the one-time payment for that from last year. Moving on to line number 39, there is a little bit of an increase for our parking lot lease by $2,710, I'm sorry. So just a slight increase for that expenditure. Now if you go down to lines number 51, 2, and 54, you're going to see where in 54, this is our coaster program. We reduced it by $300,000 and we reallocated it to lines 51 and 52, which is our other vendor that we have. Every year, all year long, we consistently look at our routes, the changes of schools, changes of students coming in or leaving. It's always going to make our routes different. So we're constantly looking into that, and we want to make sure that we're spending the money where it needs to be spent. Now, one of the things that we did with this current year is we reviewed these routes, and we found out that we could save money by going with one of our outside vendors that we are currently working with. And what we did is we took all of our coaster runs and we looked at every single route that the coaster had. And we looked at what the difference of the pricing that our outside vendor gave us compared to what we're currently paying. And we moved them over this year. And I don't have the exact figure, but I want to say in the ballpark of $350,000 that we saved for this budget, not this new budget, but last year's budget. That's a considerable savings, and the service is fantastic.
We're sharing some routes with Washingtonville, and the cost comparison versus the coaster routes, we kind of cherry picked where we're going to see a significant savings and push them over to Orange County Transit.
And again, all of our routes, they're analyzed quarterly, and or as an ongoing basis, as needed. We'll get an influx of kids that have to go out district. So we look at that all the time. So these numbers are very important to us. We want to make sure that we're not spending the money where we don't need to. So overall, I have a decrease of $550,915. Which is a decrease, negative 10.66%, saving transportation money.
Questions for Mr. Powers?
The only thing that I want to ask is because of the electric vehicle mandate, what year is it that we can no longer purchase diesel? And I know that they're talking about changing things, so it's all up in the air.
So we have, right now, the law requires that you're supposed to stop purchasing them by 2027. There, though, is in place two two-year waivers. So we've applied for the only one you can apply for now, which is the first waiver. We applied prior to March 1st. They said after April 1st, they'll start making decisions on those waivers. One of the things that is basically like an automatic acceptance is if you're currently involved in a NYSERDA study to determine what the requirements are, which we are. So we sent a NYSERDA contract, we have purchase orders, we have all of that was submitted with the waiver. So that should put us out to 2029. I doubt we'll be ready by then.
No.
So we would apply for the second waiver, which would put it out to 2031. And now, right now, 2035 is supposedly the year, it's either the last year you can run diesel buses or the year you can no longer run diesel buses. Whether that remains or that gets pushed out based on, I think at this point, you know how this worked, right? They passed a law and they said, let's figure out if we can do it.
Yeah.
So now NYSERDA is doing all these studies. So perhaps when they get that information from NYSERDA, they might be able to make more educated decision as to what those timelines are realistically going to be.
Yeah. All right, that was the only question I had. Thank you.
Go
I
ahead.
had two questions. First, on line 2 for the replacement of the buses. This does or does not take into account aid. This is our cost for the buses?
Correct.
So this is already taken into account any aid that we would get? cover the cost of the bus?
Well, aid would be anticipated through the revenue piece.
Okay, so it's somewhere else.
Correct.
Yes.
Got it. And then the second question is there ever a scenario where you can lock in the price of gas? Like, do any companies do that, or you pre-buy it at a certain price? Or?
We purchase everything through OGS, so New York State contract. So we're bound by because of the dollar value that we purchase, we have to purchase in either that manner, we'd have to bid, we have to do something like that. So we're bound to whatever the structure is. Now I know like with fuel oil, things like that, we typically send estimated volumes to them so that they could, the vendor can be squared away to have enough supply. But I've never heard of anything where we're able to, kind of like heating oil, where you try to buy. I've never heard of that with fuel. Right.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And I just have a comment, sorry, and I'll comment on that. And I think I've commented on this in the past. I feel like we might have had this question in the past, but I know for local bids, how it typically works, and it may be how they do it through OGS, is it is kind of a set price, but it's based on the market price, and it might be above or below.
Correct, like a-
So they're guaranteeing you like, okay, we'll sell it to you for whatever the daily
2.5
oil
cents
price is that day,
right.
minus 2 cents, plus 2 cents, whatever. So it's always going to vary based on what the market price is, but you might have a deal on paying a little bit above or below that average. Okay, and then my other comment was just that this is a very, I think you've run a very tight budget the past few years, as a budget should look, where you're spending your budget amount, and I think your changes here just tighten that up even a little bit more, so it looks very good to me. My only question is probably more for Patrick on lines 40, 41, and I'll throw 44 in there. So I don't see a lot on the historical. Is that possibly getting coded to a different?
No, that's just kind of we have insurance budget in other areas. This is just in case we had some kind of one-off thing that's applicable directly just to the bus garage. And we don't have anything to cover.
So possibly like a deductible would come out of that if it was something specific to the bus
It's
garage?
a good thing we don't see any activity.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering. And then the same with the custodial supplies, but I guess that just gets charged to like a general.
Yeah, and some of that stuff, if they don't buy it directly and it's just the buildings and grounds coming through using their supplies. But whenever they do buy supplies, we try to push it through there.
Okay, great. That's all I had. Good job.
Thank you.
All right, no more questions? All right, then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Witherow to handle Budget 24, Debt Service.
Thank you, Mr. Powers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Powers.
Thank you.
All right, so debt service, not a lot going on here, just movement. We did bond last year with DASNY, so we do see some differential between making interest versus capital payment or principal payments. If you remember, we discussed aligning that bond with the anticipated useful building aid payments. And we made the decision to do it at a 14-year, which is a little more aggressive, but I think was a more responsible thing to do. So we'll probably see, you'll see those changes more so than if it was happening over 30 years or 20 years. Bond anticipation note, last year we did not need the ban because we bonded, and we didn't need any additional capital money than what we already had on hand. We will be banning this year because, again, we're financing future capital construction projects. So we do have money in on the ban principal and the ban interest. The bus bond, so a couple of years ago, we moved the buses into the general fund budget, so we no longer run separate borrowing authorizations. So this is just feeding out. So you can see next year we'll have another 22. We may have another payment, but it's phasing out. So the $337,000 that was from the 2021 bus bond, that last payment was this year. So coming into next year, we only have the one ban out there that continues to ride. And I can get an update for the next meeting as to when that's going to be finalized. Again, with the ban amount dropping for the buses, the interest drops too. So we see a drop there. And then, the revenue anticipation notes, we decided, I think it was last year, or we just took that out because, again, we were budgeting every year, but we never had to get any RAMs. And when that energy performance contract ran out. That's still on there just so you can see the historical value. At some point we'll hide those and get them off the sheet if we don't need them. So overall, debt is down about $467,000 or about 8.32%.
Okay, pretty straightforward.
Yep. If you like that one, you're going to love the next one. Interfund transfers, down about $78,800. You know, we have the transfer to special ed for summer school programs. We do that every year, so that's just up about $10,000 based. If you look at the historical cost, we were budgeting a little bit less than where we are, so we're looking to try and align that. And then again, that transfer to capital, there's just a small piece of the Smart School Bond Act out there that looks like it's hanging around the general fund. So we're going to try and clear that up. But again, a significant reduction for an overall reduction of $78,800 on interfund transfers.
Next, payroll.
The easiest one.
Line by line.
So you got a lot of information in front of you there. You can see, you know, there's variabilities. Now in here, you got to remember, this isn't necessarily, you know, somebody's salary, right? There's other things in there. There's contractual caveats that, you know, people have the ability to buy back vacation days. So we budget for worst case scenario. Everybody buys back every day they can. Everybody works here. Longevities kick in at different times. So it's really hard. But what I can tell you is the salaries that people make go through a whole nother process. This is just the budget. This isn't the actual salary contract, salary agreements. That's a whole process. So, you know, don't necessarily get hung up by looking at a number or an increase and saying, well, that doesn't look to make sense. Because again, sometimes we will massage a little bit if we anticipate that there's going to be additional work for somebody in a year. We might put a little bit more money in there to cover that additional time. Other years we might back that back out depending on what's going on. But overall, this is it's been pretty robust in that it's given us the ability to cover payroll. It's a large chunk of the budget. If you look at the end, you know, this year it's up $2.689 million to $54,546,259. And then, you know, we have the FTE equivalents there on that last page, so you can see how many we had budgeted in 25-26, what we're anticipating in 26-27. But again, a lot of information. I understand if you need some time, so we do have another meeting, the next Finance Committee meeting. If things come up and you have questions, please send them to me and I'll try and run them down. But we did go through based on some questions that were asked initially. You know, what happens is you get a lot of movement sometimes, right? So you run this, you get this data, you pull it out and you start manipulating it, but the next day it's different, right? Somebody left, somebody came in. So occasionally I'll get things where I've got people who left budgeted and the new person budgeted. So again, we go through, I run new reports out of Envision compared to my data in my salary spreadsheet, and we're constantly making adjustments. So this number very well could change by the next meeting as we continue to go through things. We try and, any new information we have up until the date of adoption, we try to reflect where we can make the changes, right? And we'll relay that information to you to highlight the differences. But everything that I've looked at in here, and I've gone back into the base data and looked at anything that looked a little weird. You'll see, you know, back when you get to 2855's line items, 104, 105, that area. The first round you saw, they were all just kept the same, but I know there's going to be different. We don't know who all these people are going to be next year. We don't know where they're going to be. So I took like I think I put like 4 or 5% and I bumped them up just to give us some room. If we get more, you know, every year as coaches get more experience, they move up. But again, we don't know who's going to be in those positions. So, you know, sometimes it's hard to kind of join the two concepts of expense and budget, right? But they are two different things, and we certainly could have what we anticipate to be an expenditure, and we may budget differently because we have to cover the worst case scenario, not what we hope or think would occur, but what could possibly occur. So if anybody has any questions, honestly, I probably wouldn't be able to answer a lot right now, but if you see questions, please send them to us, and we'll have the ability to get you answers, and then we'll review this sheet again at the next Finance Committee meeting.
It is one area that is continually changing.
Yep. It's different today than it was yesterday. But we just eventually will have a snapshot in time, but that's why we have to have a little bit of room to maneuver in here, because things will change. You know, we may pick up a person that we didn't count on. But then we also know that not everybody here is going to work in these positions for the entire year. So there'll be gaps when somebody leaves and when you hire, so we get a little bit of relief there too.
Yep.
Any questions on anything right now with this?
We'll move on to employee benefits, budget number 27.
It's another fun one. All right, so as we go through here, most of this information on the first few lines, the ERS, TRS, Social Security, FICA, that's directly related to the payroll budget. So as payroll changes, these change. We did get a little bit of relief on the TRS this year. The expected contribution rate for employers was a little bit lower than it's been in previous years. So we got a little bit, if you see on line 3, we got a little bit of break from last year to this year, but that's okay, line 1 ate that all up. So going through the one piece I want to highlight and talk about, because we did talk about something we're going to do a little bit differently, is line 12. So line 12 and 13 is the health plan. So we've talked in the past about the fact that we run our own health plan. We're subject to a much larger degree of variability than we would be if we were in the consortium at OU Health. Right? If we were in the consortium at OU Health, I could tell you right now what my health care costs would cost for the rest of the year, and I'd be able to give you a fairly accurate fund balance projection. I can't do either of those, unfortunately, because we have no ability to predict what claims are going to be, right? We are getting an updated projection from USI and Anthem. They're working on it now. I anticipate by the next Finance Committee we can talk about it. But right now we've got budget in there, a 6% increase in the rate, which is less than, my understanding is less than what OU's rate is increasing for next year. But what we did do, if you look, you see claims in excess of anticipated expenses for $2 million on line 12.
Oh, okay, yep.
So we have, excuse me, a health insurance reserve, which has a decent amount of funding into it because of the volatility that we could experience with this. We did talk, you know, we have stop-loss insurance. The stop-loss insurance went up close to $450,000-$500,000 this year, which is a significant, it was a 40% jump. We had one bidder. Right. So, unfortunately, the stop-loss market, with the way expenses have been, has not been kind to anybody, right? So that was a significant increase in this overall cost, but what we have is we have individual stop-loss and we have an aggregate stop-loss. So an individual stop-loss is per member, right, or per participant in the plan. That limit right now is $250,000. So we would cover claims up to $250,000. Once we cross $250,000 for somebody, stop-loss insurance picks up and we start getting we still pay it, but then we get reimbursed for the payment in excess of the $250,000. For information purposes, Orange Ulster BOCES stop-loss insurance is $675,000 per person. They're a much larger group. They got much larger fund balance. Right? They can absorb that easier than we can. But then we also have what's called aggregate stop-loss insurance. So aggregate stop-loss insurance, through this Anthem, and puts kind of a projection based on all of the claims we have, anybody who's a high-cost claimant, anybody who's on regular maintenance medications, has regular maintenance medical issues, and they kind of project what our maximum anticipated claims could be. Now, this is the number where every one of their assumptions comes true, which is not going to happen, right? But they still have to get to that dollar value because aggregate stop loss kicks in when we hit 125% of what that number is, right? So that number for us gives us probably, I think right now it's about a $5 million spread between what we have budgeted and where aggregate stop loss would kick in, right? So again, to try and decrease the volatility or the impact of volatility on the budget overall, if we had a year that went really bad and claims really went through the roof and we got all these people hitting 245,000, right? So we're not getting any individual stop loss, but we don't hit enough to get the aggregate, or even, we don't even want to hit the aggregate because we wouldn't be budgeted through there, we're exposed, right? So we had talked about saying we're gonna bump up another a set amount. We're gonna go with $2 million to start. Then we're going to kick in on the revenue side money from the health insurance reserve. So again, we're appropriating an expense that may occur. We hope it doesn't, and we're really not planning on it occurring, but it could, right? So we need a revenue source that we could use if it does.
Right.
So by appropriating the insurance reserve, what happens is we've got that revenue source to match the expense if it occurs. If the expense doesn't occur, we don't spend the money.
Right.
That money goes back at the end of the year. It's part of leftover fund balance, and then the following year, we'd look to probably do the same thing, right? And then we're going to try and find the sweet spot where we can cover like what we'd expect to occur, 85-90% of the time, right? We don't have to cover the whole gap, but because it's very, very unlikely we would ever hit that level. But I think what I don't want to do is say we got to shut down JV sports because we got bad claims early in the year, right? We want to just have that flexibility. Then at the end of the year, if we wind up dipping into that, we're going to have to reevaluate what the rates look like going into the next year, right? So this is the first year this is being put in this. We're going to see it on the revenue side too, but I just wanted to call it out because we had talked about it, and it's a significant. So it's going to cause our budget to jump too, right? But I think I'll be able to adequately explain that. We'll be able to explain it in the budget newsletter when we go out to talk with the various groups. Most people are more concerned about the levy and how that impacts them. We had the same type of situation that happened when we brought the buses into the general fund. We saw a big jump in the overall budget, went up like $7 million that year, but 3 of it was buses, right? So I think we can explain that, and I think the community's understood enough from what we've done previously that it shouldn't be a major issue. And I just tucked that all on line 12, but obviously line 13 is just the split of the anticipated transportation. And then going past that, line 14, Medicare reimbursement, you can see we're getting real close to hitting what we budget in actual, so we bumped that up a little bit. Dental vision benefits, we bumped up slightly. Again, you see budget to actual is over what we were budgeting. Then a small increase on those last 2 items, and then a little bit of a decrease on line 18. Overall, from last year to this year, healthcare budget's up $3,864,555. 2 of that being the
reserves.
The other, right? Or 13.24%. Any questions on? Now, employee benefits, they're gonna give us a projection again, which it may be. They're saying, look, you could have a bad month fall off and a good month, and that's gonna change your numbers. I don't really feel comfortable budgeting in a whole year based on just a fluctuation of 1 month. So if the numbers come in a little bit better for us, we're probably gonna hold this tight because it's just, we've been running a little higher than we have historically, so I'd rather not look there to try and save the money.
How long have we run our own health insurance program?
I want to say we started in roughly around 2016.
So I think
Also 10 years.
Yeah. We've had some good, we have some good data to look at. when we're making some of these decisions, but we are running, as Patrick said, historically a bit higher than we have before. So I think it's prudent what we're doing on both things that Mr. Witherow explained, which is putting that extra safety net in, and then if the numbers come back and there could be a slight adjustment, I think we're just going to leave it just to add that extra protection in.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I'm safe than sorry.
Yeah, a percent, I think it's going to be like $140,000.
Yeah, so what is that?
Yeah.
That's a question. What percentage of our employees use our insurance? I mean, like don't have other, like decline our insurance because they have insurance through.
I don't have it on top of my head.
I'm just curious. Like, is it a big amount? Is it...
Oh yeah, I would think the majority of people have our insurance who are eligible. You know, we do, if someone has coverage through another, through a spouse or, you know, some other arrangement, they're able to get a buyout, so they get $2,000 because they don't take the insurance.
Okay.
I could get you real numbers.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I mean, it's just things are so volatile right now between the job market and layoffs, with, you know, all the stuff that's happening with Medicaid and the exchanges, and you think, you know, could we possibly see an influx of people into the plan?
Right.
So just be curious to know what percentage of our employees are not.
I'll get those numbers.
Is there like a certain amount of time they have to let us know by if they intend to join? Is there only a certain open enrollment
There
period?
is. Absent a qualifying event, there's there's open enrollment periods, typically November into December, and then by January 1, we have the new enrollments. So like right now, if someone just wanted to join, they would not be eligible. They'd have to wait, join during the, unless they, again, if they had a qualifying event, then that would allow it to occur.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I
but
just
we'll
want to
get
say that
straight.
was an excellent explanation of the stop-loss
Oh,
insurance.
thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, so now we'll look at revenue. And again, everything's a work in progress. This is where we feel comfortable right now. We still don't have final state aid numbers, right? So we don't know where that's going to wind up. Hopefully, you know, historically, we've done a little bit better when we get the final compared to what the governor's original proposal was. So we're optimistic that we can maybe see that. But going through, just to highlight some of the changes. Man, I got a bad copy, so I don't have, and I didn't give you guys a copy to show you the kind of what the changes are on there. But just going through some of the highlights, you can see 2230 day school tuition. We were budgeting kind of low for where we were coming in at 40,000, 85,000 was revenue in 24-25. So we did. We bumped that up to 75,000 from 40. 2 lines down from that, interest and earnings. So interest and earnings, you can look, we were budgeting fairly low and getting significant returns beyond what we were budgeting. But we did in 24-25 bump that up significantly, and we bumped it up a little bit in 25-26. Now the money we have budgeted right now, that 1.16 million, we're projecting we will make more than that this year as of right now, right? So I think that number, it looks a bit aggressive, but I also don't think interest rates are going to be dropping like we thought they might, 6 months ago, right? So again, they're kind of, that number's kind of a plug, right? We can play around with that a little bit but I always try to under budget so that we can do a little bit better, because the worst is to over budget more and then you come in short, right? I'd much rather come in with some extra. BOCE's up 25,000. That's just to align with what the actual, we kind of know what those rates are going to be to some degree. Sale of transportation equipment, because we've been getting all the new buses in, we've been getting rid of the old buses, so we did bump that up $25,000. Insurance recoveries, health, again, 24, 25. This is all I believe between insurance recoveries, health, and other compensation for loss, the stop loss insurance is in there at some point. So we did just go up slightly to 800,000. 24, 25. We had budgeted 450, and we actually had 783 in actual. Other compensation for loss, again, just looking at the historical where we've budgeted versus what actual has come, we bumped that up slightly. Refund of prior year's expense from BOCES. Again, looking at the historical budget to actual, we bumped that up a little bit to closer to where we feel that actual is going to be. We bumped down 2703, with that we've been getting almost nothing in, so we took that down 20 grand. Gifts and donations up to 2,500. Unclassified revenues down 10,000. The state aid numbers, those come right from the runs, so those will hopefully get updated once we get. What you will see in there is when you see excess cost aid, looks like it dropped significantly. It's really not. It's the way the state does it and the way it's grouped. We just broke it out a little differently because when you look at up at state aid basic formula 3101, you can see that went up significantly. So really, if you were to be adding those two numbers together, that's more likely what to look at as a comparison from one year to the other. Looking on the second page, again, when you get through all the way down to 3289, it's just coming right off of the runs. The homeless aid, we bumped up a little bit, looking at where we were budgeted versus what we've historically received. And this would be like the McKinney-Vento. Medicaid, we got from Jeff, Mr. Fenton, kind of a projection on where he thought we were going to be. And again, we've been doing better with that because we've been much more, since we had the OSC audit, we've been much more vigilant on getting everything that we can to get reimbursed. Interfund transfers remain the same, 10,000. And then really, the appropriated reserves and fund balance are the same, except you'll see that health insurance reserve, right? So you'll see in there the 2 million that we had in the expense. This is 2,199,563. So this is a bit of a plug, right? So really that 199,563, that'd be the differential between what we've got budgeted for expenses and revenues. That 199,563 equaled it out to zero. Okay. So again, as we've said previously, there's such variability, and a lot of times, we're very conservative in the business office. So when we're projecting fund balance, we take worst case scenario. Our big thing is trying to project what the future medical claims are going to be. So we always kind of take the worst case scenario. Oftentimes we come in better than that. So we might project that we think we're going to run a deficit and we wind up with a surplus because, again, we can't predict with a degree of certainty where those claims are going to come in. One or two high-cost claimants throw everything out of whack. So I don't think it's, I don't think we have to get to like 0-0. This plug will cover us, and there's enough variability that I don't think we should sit here and argue over $200,000 on a $129 million budget. And then I wanted to just give you some information on tax cap. And again, if you have questions on this, I know it's a lot to take in. So if you go home and you think about it over the weekend, shoot us the questions, we'll get you the answers. All right?
The other thing is, we'll just have to wait to see where the state is, but you'll see in your advocacy alert that you received from NSBA today, their prediction is it will not be an on-time state budget. So, just to put it out there so that our community knows that that's really where they're at this point in time. They are not projecting an on-time budget. However, NSBA is advocating to let people know when we actually have to adopt the budget by, and it would be good for the state to actually have final numbers in place for us.
If it's late, we'd be better off if we get more money.
Yes.
We just wouldn't have adjusted it.
Yeah.
We'll get more revenue than we had budgeted for. So looking at tax cap calculation, the current year in 25-26, the year we're in now, the levy increased 2.79%, which equated to $1,485,248 right now. And this may tweak just a little bit before we get to the final meeting, but we'll have an update at the final meeting. It won't change much, but right now for 26-27, we're projecting the cap at 2.56%. So almost, 0.2% lower than the previous year, which would be a new revenue of $1,398,336. So pretty close dollar-wise to what we had last year, but a little bit lower. And again, as we've talked previously and what we've done when we go out to discuss the budget with the community, the levy, where the levy increase is, doesn't mean your taxes are going to go up, right? If we have economic growth in the community, right, if our levy goes up 2.56% and the economic growth goes up 3%, you would expect everybody to see their tax bills go down, absent little variations depending on taxable assessed values, whatever happens there. I think we've seen that the last couple of years, and I think people are starting to understand that, because we're now in like year 3 or 4 where 3 or 4 of our 6 municipalities have decreases every year. There's a few municipalities that have decreases for 2 or 3 years straight in there. So even though our levy hasn't gone down those years, because of that economic growth, that's offsetting the impact of our levy. I know that's a very difficult concept for people to get, but we've been talking about it for years now.
I know.
So we think.
I will say, my taxes have gone down. My individual tax bill has gone down for the past 2 years in the town of Mount Hope.
Same with mine.
Yes, yep.
I think one of the things that has worked very well, and what Mr. Witherow's done well, when we put our presentation together to the community, we've really highlighted the last 4 to 5 years of what's happened. And I can tell you in our presentations, we've actually had people come up to us and say, yeah, you're right, my tax bill has gone down for 2 years. And it's nice to see people really grasping that concept that growth can truly impact what the actual, what their tax bill is going to be versus what the levy is. And that they understand there's a really good chance that their tax bill will be lower.
Well, I do just want to say that I find Patrick, as a business official, to be one of the most well-spoken, relatable people in terms of explaining things. So even people who you might think they don't understand it, I think you have a way of explaining it, but the important part is making sure people speak to you or speak to somebody who understands it.
Right.
Because too often we're on social media or we're texting somebody who maybe doesn't quite grasp the concept, because it is something that comes with experience and understanding. But so I would just encourage everybody, anybody watching or anybody here, that if you know somebody who has any sort of question related to our budget or how we spend our money, to please contact the business office.
Budget questions at Minnesink.com.
Budget questions at Minnesink.com. And in addition to that, just that we are like a public entity, and the way we spend our money and the way we build our budget is required by law to be a public process. So I never would hope anybody would think we're ever pulling the wool over their eyes, or that there's something going on that they would possibly not be privy to, because everything we do is the public is privy to. So, but you have to ask the right people if you want to get the right answers. So
it's important for people to understand too. I mean, I've had people reach out and say my taxes went up 30%, and so when we look at it, I'm like, your taxable assessed value almost doubled, right?
Mm-hmm.
You put on a garage, you added a porch, you put a swimming pool, right? Those things impact. So really, when you're looking at your tax bill, if you made major improvements to your home, your taxes are going to go up regardless, because your taxable assessed value is up. That's the assessor. That has nothing to do with the school district. But just something to think about, like really, if you're comparing your bills, look at what that taxable assessed value was.
But I wish that the tax bill would show you what your previous year's actual total bill was, because unfortunately it just breaks down to say, levy increase this percent, or budget increase this percent, and somebody who maybe doesn't understand, the difference between budget versus levy is going to panic. And to that I say, please contact the business office, and you will get all the answers that you need.
Thank you, Patty.
You're welcome.
So with that, I think I'm done. If there's any questions, we'd entertain them. But even so, if you get home and think about it over the weekend, just shoot them off. We'll get them answered for you guys. All right?
Good job.
I think we're in a good place where we are right now from where we thought we would be a few months ago.
Yeah, as you see, transportation, debt service, special ed, areas sometimes where we've seen significant increases have been decreases or held steady. It really, I'm very pleased where we are now compared to where I thought we were like a month and a half ago.
And we do have cushion should we have a change in special ed.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
Yep.
you know, we
We
do
do.
plan for that
Yep.
and budget for that as well.
You said the question came up with rate adjustments. We budget for
that
future
already.
rate adjustments that are going to happen 2 or 3 years ago, but we're going to get hit,
Yes.
so we put money in there because we know something's going to be coming our way.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
And I
That's-
think you did a really good job aligning the revenues as well.
Thank you. That's the important thing to understand about a budget, right? A budget's going to encompass really everything that could possibly happen, right? Even if 20% of it's never going to happen. And we hope it doesn't happen, but we appropriate the reserves and fund balance. If we don't spend it, it goes back in. We do the same thing the next year, just to give us that room where if we have a disruption, it's not going to be a disruption to the educational program, or it's going to result in students getting something taken away from them.
Right. And that's also why, I mean, and I'm kind of asking and saying at the same time, on the revenue report where it shows our budgeted revenue in the past years and our actual revenue in the past years, it looks like we took in less than we budgeted for, but that doesn't mean that we had a deficit per se, because we didn't need to take
We
that
would have
money out of
spent
the
it.
various reserves.
Correct.
So it should, in a perfect world, look like we over budgeted our revenues when those revenues include reserve spending.
Right.
Right, okay.
Yes. All right, thank you.
All right, that concludes this budget review. Our last budget review will take place on April 9th, and that is where we will try to finalize everything for our budget for the future adoption. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.